Excellent. So let me straight go into the assumptions for this panel discussion. All of you are familiar with the published data, and we heard from the Lilly Symposium some very exciting data as well. But I would like to indulge the panelists for discussing on the real world experience and special circumstances. So recently from Mahavir Cancer Hospital, this was the data that said hormone receptor positive, HER2 negative forms 36% of the patients of breast cancer who presented. So can I start with Philippe? What is your experience at Tata?
Yes, sir, that's okay.
Thank you, Dr. Parekh. I think if we are saying that about 36% of ER positive patients have metastatic breast cancer as their initial diagnosis, then I think that would not be the case in our hospital. I think the number of metastatic patients would be closer to about 15%. They are actually close to about 15% as part of their initial diagnosis.
Okay. Right. So that is the Bombay experience. Can I ask Suman Karan from Delhi? What is your experience in terms of both HR positive, HER2 negative patients, which are 36%, and metastatic breast cancer at presentation, which are shown here as 29%?
So metastatic, I think at presentation, we see somewhere around 25 to 30% at presentation.
Okay. Right. Okay. And Mohali, Sachin, if your experience is different from these figures?
Sir, I would say it would be roughly around 25%, but we don't formally have any data,
Okay.
analysis like that.
Chaturved, you are at Rajiv Gandhi and you've had significant contribution of data of breast cancer to the database that Ramesh Nimagada has. And from the 10,000 patients of breast cancer, is it similar to this or different? Can't hear you. You will have to unmute yourself, Chaturved.
It is almost similar. We have already published it. Yep. So it is almost similar to what has been told, shown here.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So let's now go to what are the treatment objectives of HER2 ER positive, HER2 negative breast cancer. And my points are there on the slide. Can I start with Dr. Rajat Saha? What are your opinions about these points?
So you have already put the option of treating a patient with oligometastatic disease. So in a patient with one or two bone metastasis or maybe one single small liver metastasis, we are definitely looking at a more curative option, and then we definitely start the patient on a systemic endocrine therapy, but at some point we definitely try to ablate the bone disease or the liver disease also. So we are definitely looking at a more curative. For the rest of the people with more means more than 3 or 4 metastatic sites or so, we are definitely looking at a palliative option, but with an endocrine therapy.
Right. Dr. Nagendra Sharma?
Yeah.
In your practice, what is the life expectancy, irrespective of what treatment you give? If the patient has presented with ER positive, HER2 negative metastatic breast cancer, what is the median duration of response to first line therapy and what is their life expectancy?
Yeah, majority of patients of metastatic carcinoma of breast who are ER positive, if the intent of treatment, like as the previous panelist, my co-panelist has told, if the oligometastatic disease is there, they are having a better life expectancy as compared to those patients who are having polymetastatic disease, high volume burden of the disease. If correct sequencing of the treatment is given to these patients, we can enhance the overall survival benefit and progression-free survival benefit. As far as surgery for oligometastatic disease is concerned, there was only one positive trial. It was Turkish trial, which was shown, which was 2-arm trial in which those patients who were given upfront surgery followed by systemic treatment or systemic treatment, they were compared. This was a prospective trial which has shown that the overall survival benefit was about 40 months as compared to 37 months in those patients who have only given systemic treatment. Rest all trials have shown that those patients who are having polymetastatic disease or those patients who have been given fully systemic treatment, they have done well.
Excellent. Dr. Dubey, can I ask you to give your input on what is your estimate of life expectancy for such patients. Is Dr. Dubey there online?
So he's not online, sir, yet.
Okay. So Sudeep, can I come back to you? At Tata Hospital, what do you see as the life expectancy for a metastatic breast cancer patients who are ER positive, HER2 negative at initial diagnosis?
Okay, so I think, I mean, I can't quote a definitive analysis that we have performed and published, but my clinical impression is that it would be in the range of about 3 to 4 years as the average survival. And this, of course, includes patients with all kinds of clinical presentations, all performance status, and all manner of clinical presentation. And the duration of control with first-line treatment is about 1 to 1.5 years. And I know that's a thing, but that's what we see because of the marked variation in clinical presentation.
So this is extremely useful. It means to say that when we treat such patients, they have a meaningful survival with good quality of life. Isn't that right?
Yes, absolutely. That's correct.
So is there any cutoff age where you will say that I will only give first-line therapy and I will not proceed to second-line therapy because the patient is unlikely to survive enough to benefit from second-line therapy?
So I think we don't use age as a cutoff for such decisions. But, you know, there are other clinical factors. For example, if the patient has multi-organ dysfunction and is in a very poor performance status, then yes, we do call it a day. But, you know, there are multiple lines of endocrine therapy, so it would be an unusual patient who doesn't receive a second-line treatment.
Excellent. And Chaturbhuj, what is your experience on this at Rajiv Gandhi?
So, sir, regarding age, I would like to say that there is very wide variation in age. So we have given, in fact, ribociclib 400 mg with letrozole to a lady who was 93 years of age. So that was one lady who received ribociclib for around 6 months. And so I think there is no definite cutoff age where I will say. So as long as the patient is ready and the patient is fit, I would consider treating the disease.
Excellent. So the take-home message here is that chronological age is of no consequence as long as the patient is fit and able to tolerate the treatment. So now this is a list of all the drugs, current endocrine treatment options. I would like to ask all the panelists, is there any drug that you have used which is not on this list? Chaturbhuj, you can start. Then Nagendra and Rajat. Again, Chaturbhuj, you are muted. We can't hear you.
Sir, so almost all the drugs what we have used are already there. So I think there is hardly any drug left.
Nagendra?
Majority of drugs are there, sir.
Okay. Rajat?
Only alpelisib is there, which is the new entrant.
Right.
So that is the only thing which I can think of apart from this conference.
Suman?
So I've used alpelisib. I mean, that's the only thing that is missing in the list. I've used it.
And now we go back to the India's international expert on breast cancer. Sudeep, what do you have to say?
No, I'm not an expert. I'm learning from everyone, and I agree that alpelisib is one of them. But you know, we have also used prednisolone in patients as an anti-cancer treatment, and it does have some activity, and we have actually used it.
Excellent. So you should not forget old drugs like prednisolone.
Purvesh, can I make a comment?
Yes, sir. Of course.
Aminoglutathione and formastine.
Right. Absolutely. Aminoglutathione and formastine both should be there on this list. Thank you very much, sir. Now, premenopausal status and treatment decision. In your practice, which is the option of your choice? Nagendra, let me start with you.
For those patients who are premenopausal, we can go ahead with either medical castration, surgical castration, or tamoxifen. So, in those
in your practice, which is your treatment of choice?
We can use tamoxifen, and we have used like LHRH agonist, Zoladex, or along with that, we have used combination of hormonal treatments and bilateral oophorectomy, surgical castration also we have. As far as most common practice, we have used tamoxifen.
Okay. Rajat, what about your practice? Which is the most common thing that you use?
Most common thing which I have used is tamoxifen, but
Right.
I have tried to counsel my patients for a combined blockage, means
Right.
GNRH analog plus tamoxifen.
So this meta-analysis says that the combination is better both for progression-free survival and overall survival. So you would still like to use tamoxifen single agent? Is it because of cost factors or logistic factors or what?
This is what I have actually used, tamoxifen, but I have tried to counsel my patient for the combination.
Right.
But
right.
real world, I have used tamoxifen.
Yeah. And Suman, what has been your experience?
To be very honest, I've used more of AIs than tamoxifen. But yeah, tamoxifen with ovarian suppression. Whenever the woman has completed her family, I do counsel them for going to go for surgical castration. Most of the patients do undergo it.
Awesome, awesome. Now this is about tamoxifen, and what from Suman and Rajat, I believe that tamoxifen is still being used. So you see that it has been mentioned that the median progression-free survival after first-line therapy is 13 to 16 months. Do you agree with this statement? Do you have a shorter survival? Do you have a longer median progression-free survival? Can I start with Chaturved first?
Sir, most of the time we see a median PFS of around 1 to 1.5 years, as already been mentioned by the previous analyst. And with the addition of CDK inhibitors, probably we see more progression-free survival. But with only single agent hormonal therapy, I think it is not more than 1.5 years.
Right.
So in one outpatient, we can get some outstanding results, but this is average.
So, Sudeep, if some patient comes to you and says that I'm fully fit, cost is not an issue, I want the maximum progression-free survival. What is the treatment that you will use?
So I assume that you are discussing a premenopausal ER patients with metastatic breast cancer, possibly in the first line.
Right, absolutely.
So in that case, I would, so first let me say that in the majority of patients, my choice of treatment is ovarian suppression, usually with a GnRH agonist, but sometimes also with oophorectomy along with tamoxifen. But there is an overall survival benefit with the use of ribociclib, so I do offer it to patients who can afford it, and some of them take it.
Awesome.
And then I'm not, although US FDA has revoked the approval of tamoxifen with ribociclib, I'm not, I am a little bit unsure about the use of AI in women who are otherwise premenopausal for a variety of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So, I still sometimes use tamoxifen with ribociclib, although concerns about cardiac toxicity have been raised.
Right. So I'm glad to note that tamoxifen is not yet out of fashion in today's practice. So this is aromatase inhibitors versus tamoxifen. And do you follow this in all patients in your practice? I'll start with Nagendra first.
Yes, sir. Especially in the postmenopausal group, we will use straddle aromatase inhibitor, which have shown superior survival outcome as compared to tamoxifen. So I do agree with what is shown in the slide.
Okay. What about Rajat?
Yeah, I also concur with this statement that definitely AIs are superior to tamoxifen.
Excellent. Is there anybody in the panel who disagrees with this statement? No, I assume that everybody is agreed. Thank you.
So for postmenopausal patients, aromatase inhibitors are somewhat superior and they are the default option. But I'm not convinced about premenopausal women, despite there being 2 or 3 pieces of data. But yes, for postmenopausal women, there is a little bit of superiority of AIs and they are the default standard.
So your point is well taken. So we have to distinguish between pre and postmenopausal women. So I'll skip this. So combination endocrine therapy. Is there any subset in which you use combination endocrine therapy? And I've given some examples which came to my mind, but there could be other examples that you have in mind. So Chaturved, I'll start with you.
So, sir, I think as you told already at the start of panel that we have to tell our own practical experience. So we are not using any combination as of now.
Okay.
Because with the availability of newer drugs, we want to salvage these drugs. So already we have fact data, and so we know swap data, fact data. We all are aware of those. But we are not using combination. We want to, in fact, salvage our agent for using it in second line along with CDK. So whether in all
What?
So in all, whether it is previously exposed to tamoxifen or not, whether it is both ER and PR positive, so we are using single agent, and dose of fulvestrant obviously is 500 mg because it is already.
Excellent. So this is why we are having this panel discussion about the sequencing. And I'll ask Sachin Gupta, do you agree with what Chaturvedi just said, or you have a different way of treating a patient?
Hello, yeah.
Go ahead.
Sir, with the, I would actually agree with Chaturbhuj. So with the availability of CDK4/6 inhibitors and very robust data with multiple drugs of this group, so upfront use of CDK4 inhibitors with AIs would be my preference most of the times, wherever possible. So I won't be using any combination like fulvestrant or with AI or like this. So that would be a standard of care for me as of now.
Excellent. So as was already been mentioned in the previous sponsored session, as well as by some of you, there are several first line options which are also available, and they have been grouped together as to 4 different aspects. And I will start by asking each one of you that among the first line options, what is your treatment of choice for a patient who is affording and fit? So Sachin, you can continue asking. There are 1, 2, 3, and 4. You have to select number.
So first line again, sir, I would like to go for CDK4/6 inhibitors with AI.
Okay.
And even for premenopausal, we have option of using say ribociclib and along with the ovarian suppression. So wherever possible, this would be my choice.
Okay.
And so rest of the things are sequencing, sir. That is again.
This is first line only.
Yeah.
So Suman, what about you? Suman currently?
So my first line would be CDK4 inhibitor itself, combined with the AI or a fulvestrant.
Rajat?
The CDK4/6 inhibitors with AIs. So what is this option 4, sir? Novel selective estrogen.
So anything that targets ESR1 mutation. But obviously that is not something that any of you will select in today's discussion. Nagendra, what about you?
My first line option will be CDK4/6 inhibitor plus AI. But only one subset of patient I will be like using only fulvestrant. That is only bone only metastasis. In which Falcon study have shown that if the patient you expose only with single agent fulvestrant, they have shown very good survival benefit.
Awesome.
Otherwise, I will use with CDK4/6 inhibitor with AI.
Right. Chaturvedi, now your turn. In ER positive, hormone HER2 negative metastatic breast cancer, how many percentage of your patients you are using CDK4/6 inhibitor in the first?
So, sir, since we are working in a corporate setup, so for almost all the patients we are using CDK4/6. I should say more than 90% of the patients we are using CDK4/6 inhibitor. Along with
you are very much privileged, I guess. Sudeep, in Tata Hospital, are you as fortunate as Chaturvedi?
So I think we are as fortunate that I think fortune is decided by destiny and by fine things. Humans think that they can control many things, but they can't. Even if I was working in a corporate hospital, in the majority of patients with low burden and low risk disease, my choice of treatment is an AI as a first line treatment in postmenopausal women. In a minority of patients, I might prefer to use a CDK4/6 inhibitor with an AI. I might also add that there are many patients who relapse relatively early while being on adjuvant AIs, and in those patients, my choice of treatment would include fulvestrant, perhaps with a CDK4/6 inhibitor, but it might also be single agent fulvestrant. And I might also add that the SWOG study was first published in 2011 and recently has given an overall survival update. And in the last 8 or 9 years, I have used it to good effect in a large number of patients who have achieved a good long-term disease control.
Awesome. So it's always nice to be grounded. Thanks very much, Sudhi. Now, do CDK4/6 inhibitors result in meaningful overall survival? And I just summarized the survival graph from 3 studies. All of you know Paloma, Mona Lisa, and Monarch. So Chaturved, I'm sure that you have used the maximum, so you would definitely say that overall survival is better.
So with ribociclib and Mona Lisa data coming up, we already know. And now in the last session, just penultimate session of this activity, we have seen that abemaciclib OS data is also coming up.
Yes.
So obviously meaningful improvement is there in overall survival, and I would be more keen in using ribociclib in the premenopausal subset. But for most postmenopausal subset, I would be happy with both palbociclib and ribociclib. With abemaciclib, we don't have any experience.
All right. So, Sudhi, as you had pointed out in Mona Lisa 3, the first line subgroup overall survival data. So, can you just elaborate on that, please?
So I just wanted to say that there is reasonable certainty now that used in the second line setting with fulvestrant after previous use of an AI CDK4/6 inhibitors do result in meaningful overall survival benefit, and I think they should be the standard treatment if the patients can afford it. I am not certain about the first line setting. There are 2 pieces of data until now in the first line setting. One is in the premenopausal women with ribociclib with either tamoxifen or an AI, which has proven a survival benefit, but one can argue that the comparator arm was weak. And then, of course, this is the subgroup analysis of Mona Lisa 3, where fulvestrant with an AI with ribociclib resulted in an overall survival benefit when used as first line. So I am not at all certain, and which is why it is my preferred choice to use CDK4/6 inhibitors in the second line. And I think that a strategy of AI first followed by fulvestrant plus CDK4/6 will result in an equivalent survival compared to AI plus CDK4/6 in the first line setting, and result in cost savings because you need to use the CDK4/6 inhibitors for a shorter period of time. And also, of course, needs to be on CDK4/6 inhibitor with all their toxicities for a lesser duration. So that's my take. But yes, in the second line setting, I think there is now unequivocal evidence that they do result in survival benefit.
Awesome. Thank you. So, what is the aggressive disease where CDK4/6 could be better than standard chemotherapy? Chaturved, any idea?
So, sir, can you please repeat the question? What is the aggressive disease where CDK4/6 will be?
A patient has come with HR positive, HER2 negative metastatic breast cancer, and I am predicting that this patient will have aggressive disease. So, how will you treat such a patient?
So, sir, on what parameters is we are predicting aggressive disease? So, if there is no visceral crisis, so we would be definitely using hormonal therapy and no chemotherapy. Okay. But if we have an impending visceral crisis or a deranged liver functions or deranged organ function, then definitely in those patients we would try to start with chemotherapy first before proceeding for endocrine therapy.
So in that subset of impending visceral crisis, do you think that CDK4/6 inhibitors might be better than standard chemotherapy?
Not really, sir, because I think hormonal therapy and CDK inhibitors will take some time to act, and in those patients, if we wait for the response, then we might lose that window of opportunity.
Right.
So we need a rapid response. So we need to use chemotherapy.
So
we had one patient since. Sorry. So can I proceed? So we have one patient in which there was diffuse bone marrow involvement, and her platelet count was less than 20,000 because of the bone marrow involvement. So we have to proceed with weekly taxanes, and post 12 cycles of weekly taxane, now she has a very good recovery. So we have started her on CDK4 ribociclib plus aromatase inhibitors.
Awesome.
So in that scenario.
So if we look at the rapidity of responses with the CDK4 inhibitors and AA combinations, they are similar to what can be achieved with chemotherapy upfront in ER positive patients. So in most of the situations, upfront use of CDK4 inhibitors with AIs may give us good responses and rapid responses, good enough to prevent a crisis also. So in most of the situations, I would now, since after having used these drugs for many years, in such situations also, like Chaturbhuj just mentioned a situation, even drugs like ribociclib and palbociclib would have given a similar response. I think we can try them in most of such situations now.
Right.
Can I ask one question, sir?
Go ahead.
So especially now we are having MONARCH data in front of us. Abemaciclib is having excellent brain penetration. So especially those patients who are in metastatic carcinoma breast, ER positive, and oligometastatic site is brain. So in which we know that the chemotherapy will not be able to cross blood-brain barrier. Suppose you are not given radiation. So can we start abemaciclib in those aggressive brain mets? Whether abemaciclib can be better than standard chemotherapy? This is what I want to ask my other co-panelist.
So Sudeep, can you answer that?
So I think that's a very important question that you raised, and I must say that there is insufficient evidence at the current time to sort of make or give a definite answer. And I should also add that there is a study called the Right Choice study, which is exactly answering the question of whether in patients with visceral disease or significant visceral or impending visceral crisis, whether a chemotherapy of physician's choice would be the same as CDK4/6 inhibitor. So until that time, I think we can conjecture. And for example, in the patient with brain metastasis that was mentioned, I think the use of abemaciclib is reasonable based on current data, and I think some of us may prefer to use it. I just want to add in the next 15 seconds that it is not just the question of this treatment versus that for all patients. We must appreciate the tumor biology, and one of the important aspects is the strength and the proportion of ER expression. If we have a patient with significant visceral disease who has only 10% ER expression, that patient, I would be very wary of relying on only endocrine therapy with or without CDK4/6 inhibitor.
Right.
But if with another patient who has a strong expression of estrogen receptor in the majority of cells, I think one would be tempted to use that treatment.
Right. Chaturbhuj, for the last point, since you are using CDK4/6 maximum, what is your policy? If the patient develops asymptomatic progression on imaging, do you continue with CDK4/6 or switch?
So, sir, we try to see whether it is oligoprogression or whether it is a frank progression. If it is an oligoprogression, we have around so we have used palbociclib in around 160 patients. So we have four or five odd patients where we have treated the oligometastatic progression with a local therapy, and we continued with CDK inhibitor. But for a frankly progressive disease, even if it is asymptomatic, we try to get a PIK3 mutation analysis done, and we tend to change therapy. We don't continue CDK inhibitor beyond progression.
So just a request for the organizers, Ashok Vaid and Mishra.
Yes, sir.
Whenever we are, my time is up and I have to sit down. Okay.
Okay, sir. So next 5 minutes, sir.
Okay. Now let's say that your patient is a male breast cancer. Nagendra, would you treat this male patient differently from a female patient?
For ER positive, HER2 negative metastatic carcinoma breast, which are not the male patients who are not in visceral crisis,
yes,
I think we should go ahead and treat with them with tamoxifen. Tamoxifen is a better agent which can be used.
Awesome. Suman, what is your opinion?
Well, tamoxifen is a good choice, but I have used CDK4 inhibitors even in male patients, and the responses have been very good. So we have both the choices. So one of the patients actually we were able to do a surgery also for him. So finally, I think the responses are good.
Any such experience in your field?
So, very pertinent question, sir. So your question was very pertinent. Is there any difference with a male patient? And this question often came to my mind. But practically we are using CDK inhibitor with AI. And
what would you do, Sudeep?
I think that it is reasonable to use an AI with or without CDK4/6 inhibitor, but there are a number of pieces of evidence which suggest that one should preferably not do it without testicular suppression.
Right.
So it may be a good idea to have testicular suppression along with an AI. And otherwise, tamoxifen is an excellent choice, and it is my actually preferred first-line treatment in my patient.
Excellent. So you and Suman are in agreement. Now, what about endocrine resistance biomarkers? Again, Satya and Amit had mentioned about primary and secondary endocrine resistance. Chaturved, let me, since we have little time, I will focus on you for this question. What is the incidence of endocrine resistance that you are seeing in your patient?
So endocrine, we have in our real world data, we have seen a first line progression-free survival of 20 months with palbociclib and AI. And if you talk of endocrine resistant biomarkers, so that is obviously ESR1 mutation that we are doing in RGCI. Apart from that, PIK3CA mutation and overexpression and amplification of CDK6. So this thing we are not seeing. Amplification of CDK6 we are not doing. And right. PIK3 mutation, one thing which we are seeing in around 30% of the cases.
Okay. Sudeep, what has been the experience at ACTRACT and Tata Hospital?
So I must say that, everything that you've listed on the slide has been in some study or the other been associated with the response to endocrine therapy and resistance, but it is clinically actionable at the current time, except the PIK3CA mutation, which does trigger the use of either alpelisib or a PI3 kinase inhibitor.
Yes.
And I'd like to add that we have a large DBT funded project of which I am the principal coordinator, multi-institutional, where we are performing a multi-omic analysis of resistant versus sensitive endocrine receptor positive tumors using proteomics, metabolomics, transcriptomics, and genomics. And we'll hopefully publish some nice results soon. But none of this is actually clinically actionable. Yeah. So not use this to decide, whether a patient is clinically endocrine resistant or not.
So when do we expect the results from that study that you are doing?
So I think the first results we should be ready to publish in another 6 months. But the final result should take around and this is multi-omics, not just one omic. This is multi-omics on a set of tumors that are clinically and phenotypically resistant or sensitive.
Perfect. So this was something about primary and acquired resistance. And
can I ask one question, sir?
Please go ahead.
Sir, one question is I would like to ask Sudeep sir and all the panelists also that is there any thought process that getting the ESR1 mutation done upfront in a metastatic hormone positive breast cancer and then selecting the choice of hormonal therapy along with CDK inhibitors? Like for ESR1 mutated population, we would be preferring CDK inhibitors along with fulvestrant, and for a non-mutant patient, we would safely go ahead with CDK4/6 inhibitors with aromatase inhibitors. So is there any thought process like that?
Sudeep, can you answer that, please?
So first of all, you are right that Nick Turner's data does suggest that ESR1 mutations in the hotspots is associated with AI resistance. But my point is that in most of those patients, it is also clinical resistance to AI. So you don't actually need the ESR1 mutation to tell you that. And in another situation, if the patient was deserving of an AI, then maybe based on that data, if you were to do an ESR1 mutation, you might avoid it. But I don't know of any clinical study that has actually used a strategy systematically and proven that the use of fulvestrant would be better than that of an AI. So I don't think it is clinically actionable at the current time. Although biologically, yes, there is Nick Turner's data to show that.
Right. Thank you, Sudeep. Since we have already run out of time, Chaturved, I'm going to ask you to comment on this. Supposing there is a PIK3CA mutation, it will be correlating with less sensitivity to chemotherapy. The patient might have a worse outcome, but these patients still benefit from CDK4/6 inhibition. So even if you have this mutation, do you continue with CDK4/6 or your treatment is different?
So I think, sir, at this present time, I have asked this question multiple times that if we have a PIK3CA mutation upfront, whether we are going to use alpelisib upfront with AI or fulvestrant, So a lot of the time the answer is no. So this patient will still benefit from CDK4/6 inhibitors, and with a expected outcome that he will not going to do so well as compared to PIK3CA mutation negative patient. But still, the choice of therapy would be CDK inhibitor with endocrine therapy.
Right. Thank you so much. I thank all my panelists, Dr. Sudip Gupta, Dr. Suman Kalyan, Dr. Rajat Saha, Dr. Sachin Gupta, Dr. Chaturbhuj, and Dr. Nagendra for a wonderful interaction. I thank Dr. Ashok Vaid, Dr. Mishra, and Dr. Jyoti for this opportunity to do this panel. And over back to the organizer. Thank you very much.
Sir, there is a question from one of our delegate for you, sir, that what is the take of TP53 mutations before prescribing CDK4 inhibitors?
Sudip, would you like to answer that? Sudip, Chaturbhuj, can you answer that?
So we don't recommend.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So we don't recommend TP3 mutation because it's a non-targetable thing, and doing it will not add anything to our present thing. So we are not doing it.
Right. Sudip, you can comment on that as well.
So I agree with Chaturbhuj in what he said, but I also just want to add that PIK3CA is prognostic but not predictive in its interaction with either CDK4/6 and similar with P53. So patients with these mutations will do worse, but they will still benefit from those treatments. So, we must appreciate the difference between being prognostic and predictive. Predictive biomarker will predict for resistance and complete lack of benefit, which is not the case.